Then let's start. So yes, thank you for the introduction, Carl, and giving me the opportunity to be part of this webinar. My name is Jurjen, as you already mentioned, senior partner at Lucendra. We are a small boutique consultancy firm based in Switzerland. 8 people currently supporting medical device manufacturers throughout the entire life cycle of the device, from design development up to regulation, clearance, as well as post-market clinical follow-up, including running small clinical investigations. We have not offices, we have people working in Lausanne, Geneva, Lugano, Zurich, and Sion. So we cover Switzerland. And today I'm gonna walk you through or navigate the uncertainty, and then particularly related to the regulatory strategy in the US, of course, as we all know, somehow impacted, to say it politely, by the new government that came in place as of beginning of January. The outline of my presentation is to give you a quick overview, or a part of the presentation of the current administration's policies and actions, and then in particular, of course, what is the impact on the MedTech industry. Give you my first recommendations based on the first 3 months, let's say first quarter of 2025, on living under these new circumstances. And as you already mentioned, Carl, please drop your questions in the chat, and I'm happy to answer them after my presentation and even afterwards, should there be more available. I also compiled a slide with some further readings, so hyperlinks to websites where you can continue to gain further insights, because this is a hot topic. I finalized the presentation on Sunday. I had a quick look still yesterday and today if there was anything new coming up. This is an ongoing concern. So the feedback that I have received so far is that it all started in 2025 by Michel Traver, the head of the CDRH, who published beginning of January the annual report of 2024. And this actually is a nice insight to see what has happened at FDA in 2024. Some of you, of course, might know, but it's a quite large coverage of regulated devices, close to 250,000. A lot of innovation. As you can see here, 156 submissions were designated as a breakthrough device, 17 as part of STEP, and we come to that also in a minute. 120 de novos were granted approval. Over 20,000 submissions were received. And last but not least, there was a customer service rating of 9 out of 10 stars, so 91%, based on the feedback that was collected by the FDA. And I think we all can concur, based on what happened in Europe in 2017, when the medical device regulation and in vitro device regulation was published, that the pendulum shifted slowly but steadily towards FDA, towards the US. But then, of course, the story continued after January 20th, when President Trump was taking the lead. And the first thing he did already on the day of his inauguration was a regulatory freeze. So you have to be aware that basically from the 20th of January this year, there is no more new regulation being put in practice, except if there is an emergency. But other than that, everything is put on a pause. That means not only new regulation, but also guidance. And as you can see on the right bottom, there was a long-awaited guidance on artificial intelligence-enabled device software functions that was finally published on the 7th of January. It's still in a draft mode, but of course, such guidance are not going to be pushed forward directly into applicable guidance. And so this is a fundamental impact, not just on medical devices, but in general for regulatory aspects, but has an impact on many different priorities that the FDA had in their mind to put forward, and now they are put all on pause. One of them is related to the so-called executive order related to the 10-for-1 rule. When President Trump took his first presidency in 2017, he also introduced a so-called 2-for-1 rule. And at that time, it was like, okay, if we generate a new rule, we have to get rid of 2 additional rules that are already existing. That was somehow doable and basically a cleanup. In this case here, it's a huge undertaking to only allow a new rule to put into practice by removing 10 other rules. So this, of course, in addition to the regulatory freeze, is slowing down the aspect of regulation, the introduction of new guidance, etc. One point you have to notice here is that if you do a de novo submission to FDA, once that would be granted, that would require a change in regulation. It would, for example, need a new product code. These type of administrative aspects are currently being impacted also by this rule. So you can expect that if you would go for de novo submission, that might be having additional delays due to these administrative burden. The FDA recently published on their website a specific a Q&A where you can give your feedback on certain rules that should be taken away or other rules that should be implemented. So they're asking the public now to take the lead here to support. But of course, this is slowing down the overall outroll of regulation and guidance that the FDA was already planning for 2025. Another aspect that is, of course, of importance, and I think you all have seen it in the news, is related to the fact that FDA was already affected by 2 rounds of layoffs. The first one was in February, where close to 700 people were laid off, primarily in probation, which also means that these were primarily people coming from universities, so subject matter experts in their fields. They were basically laid off, but many of them were rehired since. We don't know the exact number, but there was, of course, an impact there. Secondly, as part of an overall reduction in workforce, close to 3,500 employees were laid off, and it is about 20% of the FDA's workforce. A lot based on administrative people in human resource and IT, but for example, also in travel coordinators that were there to coordinate travel of FDA inspectors. Several of these have been rehired since, but still, of course, it gives a lot of turmoil. As an output of this, you can conclude that there has been a loss of subject matter expertise within the FDA within the last 3 months. There's for sure already a delay in review and approvals, and we come to that in a minute. There will also be less engagement during the product development phase, and I come to that also in a second. And last but not least, as I already mentioned before, there will be fewer guidance documents issued by the FDA, and I think this was one of the aspects where FDA was taking the lead, preparing industry of what is expected, so that once you would submit, there wouldn't be so many unknowns. Regarding the less engagement during product development, there are different programs that the FDA has put in place, like pre-subs, like accelerated programs related to breakthrough device designation or safer technology programs. These are free programs. So these doesn't cost you as a manufacturer any dollars, but these are still paid by public money. So it might be that the people at FDA that are still working at FDA, they will have to focus on billable time. They have to focus on projects and on reviews that are being paid for by industry. So we could foresee that there would be less engagement in pre-subs, less engagement in these type of accelerated programs. On Sunday, I quickly went into the database of FDA, which you can access on their website, and I looked at the number of traditional 510Ks that were granted in 2024 compared to the first 3 months in 2025. Actually, the cutoff was on the 12th of May. There's always 1 week delay between the update of the database and the actual information. And what you can see here is that overall, the number of traditional 510Ks is similar as the last year's quarter. However, for de novo and original PMAs, there is a significant drop, and this was also highlighted in one of a press release on RAPS, that basically the FDA already has hit a 10-year low during the first quarter of this year. So this is not just a statement. This is really backed up by facts, as depicted here, that there's a decline in approvals. Knowing also, that's also part of the report that was published by FDA on 2024, that there was an increased demand of submissions. So of course there is maybe some bias that people started to wait. Let's wait before submitting, but overall there is a negative trend that there is simply less products approved during the first quarter of this year compared to last year. Another aspect that you have to be aware of is that in January 2024, FDA published a final rule related to the quality management system regulation. This quality management system regulation, QMSR, will replace the current good manufacturing practice with a deadline February 2026. And there is no grace period. Now, the good thing is for us manufacturers in Europe, we are very familiar with 13485, and basically the QMSR is based on 13485, so I don't foresee a lot of bottlenecks for us. But for American companies, they for sure have to adapt and be closer aligned to 13485. Also be aware that FDA will have, based under the QMSR, access to management reviews, internal audits, reports, as well as supplier audit records, which under the current QSR regulation was not the case. What was also announced 2 weeks ago is that QSIT, which is the quality system inspection technique that FDA has been using since 1999, the way of conducting their inspections, will retire. And it will not be replaced by a QSIT 2.0, but it will be completely new, aligned with other inspection methods that the FDA is applying, and probably will be likely inspired by an MD-SAP approach. That basically means that not only guidance documents still have to be updated by FDA staff still have to be trained as well on applying these new inspection rules. And also another document that I found, it was published in April last year. At that time, there were still 1,500 internal FDA documents that needed to be aligned with the new regulations related to the quality management system regulation. So there's still a lot of homework that FDA was already planning to do to make sure that they could hit the deadline of February 2, 2026. But of course, with the current uncertainty, there's even more work probably that needs to be done, and further delays could be expected. 2 additional announcements, one related to unannounced foreign inspections, driven by the fact that a lot of domestic inspections are taking place in the US, and foreign inspections always lag behind. As you can imagine, it's sometimes difficult to unannounced visit a facility abroad. And now the FDA put out the press release 2 weeks ago to state that they want to make sure that there are more unannounced foreign inspections compared to the ones that they have in the US. I went on the FDA website where you can go to the database.fda.gov and looked at the number of foreign inspections and domestic inspections, both in 2024 as well as in the first 6 months of the fiscal year. So from October last year till April this year. And you can definitely see, don't look at the dot of May, that's too early, but till April cutoff, there was a significant reduction in the number of inspections, both domestically as well as foreign. So there is an incentive to increase this, but facts show for the moment that there is a decline in inspections, both in the US as well as abroad. And on top of that, the day before FDA announced this expansion of unannounced foreign inspections, the top inspector himself, who was in business, Michael Rogers, for 34 years, he resigned on May 5th. Then I think one of the thoughts behind cost reduction and labor reduction is to use AI, which of course is something that we should embrace. I think it's a great tool to announce that scientific reviews could be conducted by using AI. But as I found a nice publication from Brian Spisak on LinkedIn, and the link is also here, it has to be cautious. Embracing AI is great. But it's the extent, it's the scale up that could fire back. As you all know, there are still hallucinations in AI outcome. People have to be trained. There has to be transparency. How do you come to a conclusion? Why 510K will be cleared or not? Products have to be validated. There has to be, of course, a validation between output and input. And last but not least, if all these tools are online, then cybersecurity is also at play. So again, it's a great initiative to enroll AI into scientific reviews, but it still has to be taken with caution. In particular, since the commissioner mentioned that this should be ready for everybody by June 30th within the FDA. And then, as a, let's say, cherry on the pie, as you all know, import tariffs have been announced by the US government. There were a lot of back and forth discussions between the countries around the world and the US. And for the moment, there is a universal 10% US import tariff on all medical devices, including components and raw materials. However, of course, it has a huge impact on the US market itself, because the US import close to 70% of their products into the country. So as you can see on the right side, which is a press release from Scott Whitaker, who was in front of the Congress, US Congress last week, costs have significantly increased. You can see Cardinal Health, they anticipate 300 million more. Stryker, Boston Scientific, the large corporates, they see, although they can diversify because they have already a portfolio that is probably offering their products to a variety of different countries, they still foresee a huge intake in cost that they have to bear themselves. There's, of course, an imply of disruption on supply chain. Short-term relief, China and US have come down to a bit, so it's not 145%, but still 30%. And ultimately, what AdvaMed, by name of Scott Whitaker, is currently advocating is a 0-for-0 model, which has always been the case, that medical device supply and components should not have any tariff, nor in the European Union, nor in China, nor in the US. So this is something, of course, that has not just a regulatory, but directly a financial impact. As a conclusion, this was just published 2 weeks ago. Michel Traveur, we just have to be patient. And that is a nice statement. So what can we do in the meantime? And here I looked first at some practical recommendations. If you plan to go to the US market, continue as long as you can to engage early with the FDA. So there is still the possibility to reach out through the pre-sub program to get early feedback. There is still the possibility to leverage the breakthrough or STEP program, as I mentioned before, to have continuous feedback during the design and development of your product with FDA. However, as we are talking about America first, see how you can leverage that. As a foreign company, does that mean that you have to go to the US directly? No, but see if you can benefit US patients. Now, that's a bit difficult to make selection there, but maybe focus on pediatric patients. That is, of course, a niche. There's an unmet clinical need, and that might still give you the opportunity to embark in one of these 2 accelerated programs. Please use electronic submission templates. They are mandatory for 510K submissions, and will be mandatory for de novo as of October, but they're for pre-STAR currently voluntary. Please use electronic submission templates. Why? The FDA is under time pressure, so if we already can adhere to the templates they want us to use, please use these, even if these are voluntary. For the moment, as I said at the start, it's not clear how de novo approvals will be regulated due to the regulatory freeze as well as the 10-to-1 rule. I would recommend to see if you can avoid directly calling for the de novo submission. It's a hard call, but see if you can modify or reduce your features so that you can still identify a valid predicate and go for a 510K submission instead. If we look at how to maintain US market access, as you know, medical devices are undergoing a lot of changes. So see if your changes that you will have can be packed into a so-called special 510K. That's normally only a 30-day review round. Of course, it's linked to your own device, and bear in mind it should only have 3 scientific disciplines involved. So not too many changes, but do a stage-wise submission to FDA instead of one 510K, traditional one, go for a special 510K. Or to even be more prudent, see if any change that you are currently anticipating can be covered by a letter to file. That basically means that you do this all internally, and you're not going to submit a new either special 510K or traditional 510K to the FDA, not knowing where this will end up and how long it will take, but you will do this exercise internally, correctly, and make sure that it's fully documented as if it was a traditional 510K, but you won't submit it. As I mentioned before, FDA will still come on site during inspections, and at that moment you can review together with them your letter to file. And if at that stage it would not be considered the right approach, you could still file a 510K, but you keep things in your own hands. Of course, this can only be done if there is no effect on the intended use or your indications for use. Cannot change your operating principle, and introduce new or increased unmitigated risks, or require additional labeling that affects safety or use in of the use instructions. That's another recommendation. Now, from a more strategic point of view, anticipate extended timelines. It's still very unclear. There is still unpredictability, so you cannot stay anymore, as in the past, 120 days between submission and decision. This was an internal metric from the FDA to make sure that they could get 510Ks cleared within 120 days. Don't put that in your roadmap. Don't put that in your funding or your business plan. It's difficult to say, but at least double it. As already mentioned before, these free programs like Pre-Sub, BDD, STEP, they might be reduced, or there might be less availabilities because FDA people that are still working need to focus on billable time. As there is less guidance coming from FDA, see how you can strengthen that internally. Make sure that you enhance your documentation and be ready for FDA inspectors that, as they mentioned, will be increased. And if they come on site, that you will be ready to show them the documentation that you have prepared. Last but not least, of course, engage with industry groups, and not just to stay informed, but also to advocate that we want to have a regulatory stability. And to conclude, as you all know, there is a fundamental in medical device development that is not bound to a jurisdiction. So try to diversify, go into other markets. And that just is to come and close the loop. We were in 2017 where people were getting scared away from the European market. Maybe we have to reconsider in 2025, based on what happened in the last 3 months, of refocusing on EU market for a couple of reasons. First, there have been new transition timelines for MDR and IVDR, so there's more time to comply. Secondly, there is no more notified body bottleneck. There are currently 50 notified bodies designated under the MDR and 17 under the IVDR. Notified bodies have invested a lot in time and people and money to be ready, and now they have actually an overcapacity. And I'll come to that in a minute. Of course, we have gained over the last 8 years more clarity about what is to be expected when you submit a technical documentation or a clinical evaluation or an investigation. So there is less unpredictability there. And in the last bullet point here, it was already there, but it has been strengthened again, that there's an opportunity also now to engage with a notified body, both in the pre-phase as well as in the post-application phase. As you can see here on the right side, TÜV has this on their website, how you can. It's a kind of pre-sub, although very limited, but still there's an opportunity now to engage with a notified body. As well as BSI, they publish on a monthly basis their capacity. I mean, this nobody could have dreamt of in 2017, 18, 19 that there would be this available. But now notified bodies, they have capacity. They are commercial organizations, so they have to fill the pipe. So there's an opportunity here to discuss with them and even prioritize audits or review times. Of course, there are also other markets, but the US market, as you can see here in this figure that comes from the MedTech Europe Facts and Figures 2024, the US remains the biggest exporter for European medical device manufacturers. But don't forget other countries like Japan. China, of course, is still a question mark also with the tariffs. But Middle East is growing. Middle East, there's a lot of money from an investment point of view, from a healthcare development point of view in general. And they are also with the Saudi FDA making their inroads to facilitate approval in these countries. That's a feedback on the uncertainties in FDA.
Oh, what a tour de force. Very, very nice. I really enjoy how you encourage our industry to take matter in their own hands. I mean, there are so many unknowns now, and it feels like by now we have learned that we can stop speculating because foreseeing the future seems to be very, very difficult. I have 2 questions here for you.
Yeah.
One is, I mean, we've heard regarding the tariffs that, especially the tariffs from China, that China needs to, let's say, relocate their output somewhere. Are there any indications that China is redirecting their medical devices to Europe instead of the United States?
I'm not aware of that. Of course, there is the incentive of the US government to have manufacturing of medical devices 100% being built in the US, but that's impossible to get. If you look at Steve Whitaker, who was in front of the US Congress last week, it's a 15 minutes YouTube video on CNET. Look at it, it's impossible to do that. So they try to get relocation to countries around the US. So in Mexico or Puerto Rico, where there's already manufacturing going on, to facilitate that. But to move even Swiss manufacturing to the US, I mean, it's a bit of wishful thinking. I'm not aware of what's going on with China. That's I mean, it's a huge superpower. There was more at stake than just the relocation of medical device manufacturers.
Most definitely, yes. And I mean, when I engage with medical device companies and we look at geographical markets, there are the big two. It's the US market, it's the EU market. And that's almost like a default. Like those are the two markets that we look at. In your opinion, are there markets that are under investigated that we should take a closer look at, that you think that there is a lot of opportunity in?
I said before, I think Middle East is, well, we have seen it last week by the visit of President Trump in Saudi Arabia and in Qatar, etc. There is first and foremost a lot of money, not just for MedTech, but also for MedTech. As FDA, so the Saudi FDA is really doing a great job there to harmonize and to also do their own work of getting market approval of medical device products in Saudi Arabia. And there's investment. And there's healthcare. There are complete new hospitals being built for healthcare. So there is the clients are being created because people go to the Middle East to get treated. There is investment from venture capital or from countries themselves, and there is a framework where they facilitate now medical device innovation, especially AI and wearables. So there is definitely opportunity to look a little bit more to the east, not to the far east yet, but at least to the east of a potential for raising funds, doing manufacturing there, and having a market.
Brilliant. And if anybody watching this show right now thinks that, okay, maybe I should take a closer look at this, you wouldn't know of any Swiss MedTech consulting firm that could help them out, would you? For taking a closer look at Saudi Arabia.
You can reach out to us.
Oh, what a coincidence. Thank you.
Last slide, and I will, of course, happy to share the slides. Just drop me a line on LinkedIn so these are just my sources of information, because this is all based on information that is published on the internet. Of course, there's hubs with This Week at FDA, a very interesting one. I'm also having a membership with Agency IQ by Politico. They have webinars, they have newsletters a couple of times per week. Of course, there's AdvaMed, MedTech Europe, and Swiss MedTech. And just on Swiss MedTech, they are actually organizing also a webinar tomorrow, specifically on the tariffs. That is, I think, tomorrow afternoon. So please also, if you want to have more information on that aspect, connect to that webinar tomorrow at, I think it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon.